Hello, dear colleagues. I am Olena Oliynyk, Doctor of Architecture and Professor from National Academy of Fine Arts and Architecture, Kyiv, Ukraine, and also I am Vice President of National Union of Architects of Ukraine and visiting professor here in Krakow Politechniki, and also was in Wrocław Polytechnic University and Zielona Góra Polytechnic University. My scientific interests are preservation of urban public spaces and historical preservation of historical culture heritage and urbanism and others. The topic of my lecture is urban public spaces as carriers of national identity. The Council of Europe defines urban open space and its importance as follows. Open space is an important part of urban heritage, a strong element in the architectural and aesthetic form of a city, plays an important role in education and in social interaction and promotes community development. In Council of Europe documents, open public space is defined as the public living room of settlement. A recommendation on historic urban landscapes notes that the loss of public urban spaces can lead to social and spatial fragmentation and sharp deterioration in the quality of living conditions in cities. To ensure sustainable development goals, UNESCO proposes to use a landscape approach to identity and preserve historic areas, their spatial organization and connections, their natural features and conditions. Space is a category of architecture, and for example, Encyclopedia Britannica write that space is the immaterial entity that the architect envelops, forming a completely humanistic and complete environment in an infinite natural environment. Space evokes feelings unlike emptiness. It is related to movement. Special experiences that express something are common to all, although they are not always consequently perceived. An infinite variety of such relations can be evoked by the architect. Special experience is not limited to the interiors of buildings. The sense of space in nature can be recreated by art. City square and streets, even gardens, achieve a variety of expressiveness comparable to interiors. Space and mass are the raw materials of architectural form. From this, the architect creates an ordered expressions through the process of composition. The image of a city or its fragment, which are represented by the historical spaces of streets and squares, is recognizable like a melody in music. The perception and feeling of space is related to so-called Gestalt psychology. One of predecessors of Gestalt psychology was Christian von Ehrenfels. And Gestalt is a special visual form of perceived object whose essential properties cannot be understood by simply adding up the properties of their parts. One of the striking examples of this is a melody which is recognizable even if it is arranged for other instruments. Here there are principles of Gestalt psychology. These principles create the impression of the integrity of open space. For example, the principle of proximity, the principles of similarity, the principle of integrity, the integrity of the perception of space and its order lines are achieved thanks to the following principle of Gestalt psychology. Proximity, when elements located next to each other are perceived as a whole. Similarity, fragments similar in size, contours, color, or shape tend to be perceived together. And integrity, perception tends to simplify and whole. Let's see on urban spaces in their evolution. Depending on the era, public spaces created a certain mood, embodied a democratic or totalitarian principle. For example, in Greece, the planning of most ancient cities was landscape. The Acropolis, also located on a high hill above the city, nevertheless, according to Bunin, architect and theoretic, expressed the democratic principles that were characteristic of Athenian state in this period. That is, it was truly popular. Here is Acropolis, plan of Acropolis and Pergamos. We see landscape and organic planning and open spaces. In ancient Rome, unlike the landscape planning of Greek cities, the layout of Roman cities originated from the military camp and had two perpendicular axes, the Cardo and the Decumanus, and a regular planning system. By the middle of the 2nd century, the system of empire was finally established. During this period, Rome reached the highest power. Public spaces became differentiated and controlled. Planning tended towards linear axial, which was emphasized by triumphal arches. Grandeur and monumentality were inherent even in minor provincial cities. For example, Timgad, Palmyra, and others. Here is examples of ancient Rome open spaces. And in Middle Ages, characteristic close types of spaces were formed. Streets and squares of regular and linear type. At this time, there was a sacralization of public spaces and the city as a whole, which was associated with the rediscovery of Jerusalem. You can see examples of urban planning in medieval Europe and sacralization and closure of spaces in Prague and Siena, in city as a whole and fragment of space. For the people of Western Europe, the Roman Empire, a linear perception of time and space, the ambiguity of historical events and their binding to place and time were characteristic. From here flowed the composition of the city, which reflected in the market square the symbol of so-called four-part God-saved world, city of God. And the church square signified the communities belonging to Catholic Church. The presence of two centers testified to the peripheral position of the city in relation to Rome. It's interesting that the slaves and Byzantiums were characterized by a multidimensional perception of space and time. Cities that were formed under the influence of the Eastern and Western Roman empires are distinguished by stable, unchanging features of type of spaces, the so-called topological invariants. The principles of ancient Russian urban planning were closer in semantic structure and ideological basis even to Jerusalem and the idea of eternity than to the cities of Europe, the heirs of Western Roman Empire. The ancient Kiev Rus city inherited from Jerusalem and Byzantium, first of all, a spiritual essence. Here is Novgorod, Suzdal, Sokal, Vitebsk, and in Ukraine, in recent Ukraine, Lutsk and Kiev. In Byzantium and Kievan Rus, a landscape open planning structure was formed, the basis of the system of connection of which were visual axes between dominants, sacral dominants. In the Renaissance era, the geometrization and formalization of city space take place. The concept of the ideal city is formed, and open space dominates over the internal one. We can see, for example, in Ospedale degli Innocenti, Piazza Santissima Annunziata, where open spaces dominate. In Baroque era, there is an aestheticization of space emphasized placed on visual perception and the surrounding environment. Spaces become multifunctional. The function of trade and food appears. Thanks to the emergence of public spaces, cities develop rapidly. Classicism, as in the Renaissance, returns again to the geometry, rationality, proportioning, linear, limited spaces. Architecture becomes facade, spaces regular, and later the concept of garden city returns to open spaces surrounded by nature, so-called riverside, created in the suburbs of Chicago according to the design of landscape architect Frederick Olmsted, the creator of Central Park in Manhattan, and then parks in Brooklyn, New York, and Montreal. This concept was ahead of European experiments with garden cities and had a huge influence on Ebenezer Goddard, whose name this concept would later forever be associated. The concept of the city of beauty considered the city as an organic whole, forming a landscape approach to planning. The aestheticization of regular type or scale became characteristic. This concept was embodied in the reconstruction of Chicago by Daniel Bernheim. The hyperscale of the city of beauty was designed not for individual, but for the mass, from which one thing was expected, to be imbued with a sense of attraction of greatness. It is quite natural that the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century gravitated to the same model with particular passion. It is revealed that totalitarian regimes formed parade large-scale spaces with a deterministic control and direction of movement. Here is examples of totalitarian spaces in German and USSR. Modernism creates fundamentally new concepts of public space. Urban space now flows around buildings, losing its geometric shape and turning into an amorphous mass. The era of modernism changed the spatial paradigm of the traditional cities, which led to the loss of historically composed types of public spaces. Cities thus began to gradually lose spatial integrity, and the informed spaces around high-rise point buildings do not allow them to be fully used for social function. But urban spaces are used by residents when their form has a certain definition and creates a continuous flow between the masses of buildings. When the shapes of a city is predominantly vertical instead of horizontal, the towers, slabs, or skyscrapers common to the modern landscape, the formation of coherent urban space is impossible. This analysis of process of urban development has shown that open public spaces were the basis of their formation. The spatial structure of cities in the process of development reflected the dominant political system. At the same time, the modern era is characterized by gradual convergence of external and internal space. The formation of public complexes based on combination of interior and open public spaces and their democratization. Open space began a symbol of returning to democracy. Modern architecture proclaims that human liberation and open planning are inseparable. The ideological goal of urban space as a public space is a complete permeability of information. Urban spaces are organized as significant spaces that attract or repel certain audiences, that express meaning through the events and rituals that take place in them, and that are carriers of identity, history, and culture. Let's see on the patterns of open spaces which create an identity of the city and are the basis of the composition, identity, and recognizability of all cities. In every city, this pattern is different. For example, Istanbul, New York, Paris, Berlin, Osh, Drogobych in Ukraine. The pattern of transit spaces creates the special structure of the city and forms unique urban planning elements. This is Jerusalem and different cities in Portland, San Francisco, New York, Paris, Atlanta, Osaka, and other. The drawing of spaces indicates the time of their appearance. We can see that one part of city was built in one time and other in in different time. The instrument for analysis of spaces is so-called space analysis and space syntax. First layer of city may be searched by figure ground theory, which investigates connections between buildings mass and open space. Then we can search composition of the city, dominance and access structure of connection between them and other, and at least place theory, so-called genius loci, because every place is the carrier of memory, context is very important. So there are 3 points of searching city structure: morphology, syntax, and meaning. And instruments are spatial analysis, spatial syntax, and semantics. Spatial syntax is scientifically based, person-centered approach that explores the connections between spatial planning and a range of social, economic, and environmental phenomena. Spatial configuration analysis method means that architectural environments can be viewed as configurational entities in terms of spatial and formal organization. Configuration is a defining component of architectural and urban planning, as it takes into account all possible relationships and the simultaneous influence of one on another through this relationship. The main strategy of the syntactic method is to analyze the configurational properties of the spaces that make up the plan, and through this to identify key structural features of the plan. We can create 2 basic models of this configuration in cities. One is a model with central integration core, which provides for free movement and the possibility of familiarization with all surrounding spaces. This model is characteristic and usually perceived as more socially exciting. Another one, linear unfillet, in which the movement is definite and consistent. It is perceived as more restrictive. This is centric structure, integrated structure, and linear structure. A linear structure used in totalitarian or regulated societies, and centric structure with integrated main space is used in democratic societies. You can see examples of centric structure, Piazza Navona and San Marco in Venice. And on the level of the city of Bologna and Paris, multi-center and multi-center structure with many integrated cores. This is unfilated linear structure of the connection in regulated societies. For example, Vatican Square before St. Peter Cathedral And of course, in totalitarian Soviet cities, Minsk, Belarus, and Zaporizhia in Ukraine, and even in New York, which also was a very regulated city at the beginning. This is another examples of this linear structure in eastern cities, Morocco and Samarkand. Varieties of the linear axial model are linear B-axial and branchial axial and two-axial maybe. But the main idea is the X with little spaces along it. Multi-axial structure, for example, GA, two main axes with different public spaces on them. These models are different also by directions of movement. If in a central integrated model with main space movement is free, in linear structure movement is different, is controlled and regulated. The configuration model of public space which demonstrated movement in a clearly fixed direction is linear axial, a model characteristic of introverted society, does not involve communication and interaction. It directs, determines, and controls the behavior of people. This is example of special analysis of city of Kiev, central part of Kiev, Krещатик Street, and main square Maidan Незалежності. We can see the potential integrated model, but not realized at the moment. Space is the environment of urban experience, a carrier of memory and a place of identification. And transit spaces, streets, transport areas, and embankments, among them, subspaces can be distinguished according to the degree of traffic intensity, walks, bicycle paths, roadways, and others. And stationary spaces, squares, courtyards, and cordoners. Here, the examples of Florence and Venice squares. San Marco Square in Venice, it is example of stationary space and integrated, very integrated space with many spaces around it. This Piazza Navona also stationary and integrated space. Interesting to see these spaces in with different activities and in different time. For example, in flow during flow in Venice. This is living spaces in Tbilisi. Interesting example of common space. Common living space with absolutely unique courtyards and internal spaces of blocks. Bucharest, passageway formed by platan's trees in Rome, and different spaces in city of Rome. We can see differentiation and value of these very unique and interesting spaces, open spaces, and different activities of people on these spaces. Historic city is a holistic entity, a cultural landscape in which open spaces play no less a role than architectural monuments. The first 2 decades of the 21st century were marked by the movement of European society towards integration, democratization, and sustainable development of cities, as well as the preservation of public urban spaces. Important documents of the Council of Europe and UNESCO were adopted relating to the principles of special development of cities and establishing in territorial dimensions the need to take into account human rights and democracy, such as the preservation of unity in diversity. That is the individuality of European cultures which have shaped and preserved the special diversity of landscapes, cities, and settlements of Europe. For example, we studied and searched Ukraine now, how to rebuild Ukraine with creating of new identity. What Ukraine should be. And we decided that a recovery plan must include local context and heritage, global trends and UNESCO goals, and of course new heroic history. And main goal of in rebuild of Ukraine should be recovery of identity in society, culture, and architecture. Priorities in city planning, identity in city planning, should be strategic plan with flexible system of planning, priority of culture heritage in cities development, urban planning documentation, forming of pedestrian zones and public space system, then sustainable development, of course, with 17 UNESCO goals, new technology, energy saving and efficiency, recycling and reuse, and others. And safety and resources availability with low-rise buildings, integrated public spaces. Of course, we have to organize underground cities for recent time. Blue Shield for all kind of heritage and development of underground spaces. Identity in architecture also should include town planning tools, architectural tools, and artistic and social tools. From town planning tools, we can recognize culture, heritage development, preserving types of urban spaces, new ideological public spaces, actual composition, museumification of battle sites, memorialization of recent history. In architectural tools are such features as symbolize the achievements, explain the goals, attention to styles, and new progressive technologies. And artistic and social tools are monuments, museums, memorials, symbols and signs, toponymics, and that interesting serendipity as feeling of happiness in open space. It's very important for creating of new identity. Image of city also should include morphology of urban spaces, culture, heritage development, and genius loci, as creating and strengthening of semantic of places, memorialization of heroes and battles, and saturation of public spaces with new meaning. The significance of historic public spaces and their elements. We can see one sign as, for example, pile of stones, then meaning, then significance, and then at last value of this place. It's the way of building of identity. This slide, on this slide, you can see manifesting the significance of cultural heritage through public spaces with identification of meaning and association of value through these meanings. Urban space serves as a symbolic form for nation, people, and era, and special system are a symbolic text. Each architectural space can carry a whole range of meanings that are read differently in different cultural contexts. Hidden in the depths of consciousness, but determining people's behavior, the meaning of special forms form a field of implicit culture, which is steadily transmitted from generation to generation. This is an example of serendipity in public space. Serendipity is my favorite term, means feeling of happiness in public space, and integrated centric structure creates this feeling of serendipity. So it is also the goal for architects to create public spaces with potential serendipity in it. Case study Kyiv. Kyiv has had before for 10 years, for 10 centuries before, had linear city structure and picturesque panorama during the evolution. But now the situation was changed and city destroyed by new ugly buildings, and historic panoramas and views are ruined by new construction. You can see destruction of public spaces in historic center, and many reconstruction issues. For example, uneven development of parts of the cities, destruction of public spaces, absence of decisive decisive town planning documents, and other. This is proposal for finding lost spaces in city of Kyiv. For example, you know, we made last year a proposal for regeneration of little river Libit in the center of Kyiv to renovate green belt around historical center. All squares in Kyiv are currently only for transport. Pedestrian access and functions are limited. System of pedestrian public spaces have to be connected with cultural heritage sites. And there is a possibility to do it, but maybe in process of rebuild Ukraine after the war. It is interesting to see connotative semantic of space on the example of main square in Kyiv, Майдан Незалежності. Denotat of this space is main square of the city, but connotate were changed during its presence. For example, at the beginning it was Duma Square. At the 19th century, it was first connotation as People Democratic Square, as a Renaissance Square Forum, little square for walking with fountain and other people activities. Then second connotation was representativeness, preservation of three-parted structure, as was at first time, and but without spaces changing, only strengthening of representativeness. And at the 70s of 20th centuries, the semantic meaning was a space for holding ceremonial events and parades. The space of the square was expanded to the opposite side of Krakowskiej and fixed by a monumental monument, a statue of Lenin surrounded by the proletariat. Despite the pronounced pro-communist ideological sound, the composition of the square as an urban space was brilliantly executed. The connotation of solemnity and the ceremonial function of the October Revolution Square was reinforced by arrangement of a linear row of fountains and directed the space. And next connotation was demonstration of oligarchic shadow business. It was the result of reconstruction of Maidan Незалежності at the end of 20th century, the beginning of 21st century. Political goal, which is read here, to make the space of the square as inconvenient as possible for demonstration and fragmented. And pragmatic goals, the strengthened oligarchic stratum demanded areas in the center of Kyiv for profitable investment projects, underground shopping centers. But five connotation, symbol of freedom, it is that connotation which appeared from 2004 and remain until now. However, despite the suggestion of meanings of oligarchic capitalism, the space of Maidan Незалежності remained a place of identity inextricably linked with the idea of national unity. All recent Ukrainian revolutions, both the Orange Revolution of 2004 and Maidan 2013, took place on Maidan Незалежності. These pictures from 2004, this 2014, so-called Million Meeting, and examples of forming of new identities in Maidan Незалежності. It was a competition on 700 area near Maidan Незалежності in Kyiv, but not realized, unfortunately, until now. But interesting ideas with creative of new identity. For example, this project with so-called memory trails and another project with light as memory of heroes, and this column of lights to heaven. Another types of contemporary cultural heritage are memorial places of execution and burials, memorials to the victims, and different, which should be represent in new identity and new history of Ukraine in its rebuild. We have now some interesting memorials realized. For example, Memorial of the Heroes of Heavenly 100 in Lviv, Memorial Complex of Military Burials of Heroes of Ukraine, also in Lviv. Very interesting Romanevsky Bridge. If you remember, it was a bridge over Irpin River, which was burned by Ukrainian army to stop Russian army. And now idea to renovate it of this bridge was to remain old bridge as memorial complex, and new bridge was built just near it. And in the night, it is very interesting memorial. Other examples in other countries, for example, Treblinka in Poland, Latvia, Dachau, Germany, Rumbula, and interesting memorial to the victims of the Holocaust in Latvia, memorial to 168 victims of terrorist attack in Oklahoma, memorial to burned 91 witches in Norway, very interesting memorial, and memorial to 200,000 Frenchmen who died in concentration camp in Forties, Paris. A National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, National Holocaust Memorial in London, Pentagon Memorial, and of course National September 11 Memorial and Museum. Jewish Museum, Libeskind Memorial, and Memorial to Murdered Jews of Europe by Peter Eisenman, and others. Bogdan Cherkes, our famous professor of architecture, said interesting thing, that by identifying ourselves with the nation, we do more than identify with our profession or community. This is a means of achieving personal immortality through common ancestor. And it's very important that public spaces are those places which include this identification and identity of city. Thank you very much.